And when they do actually take advantage of the lack of pushback, they just do it. Donald Trump last week, straight up, I'm not even going to ask Congress to go to war with Venezuela, but if I do, I'm sure they would even agree with me. That's what he said. All right, now let's get to the real enemy, Venezuela, okay? The enemy of the United States of America. It's existing over there, looking sexy, probably deserves an invasion. You can't be having those vast oil reserves, okay? And get away with having those vast oil reserves left untouched, okay? Got to get in there. Got to do something about that sexy ass oil.
Breaking news, new reporting this morning that the U.S. is preparing to strike targets inside Venezuela, a major escalation against the Maduro regime. And this is according to the Miami Herald, which has sources with knowledge of the situation telling the paper the Trump administration has decided to attack military installations inside Venezuela, and they could come at any time. That is, House members from both sides of the aisle say they were left with more questions than answers after a classified briefing yesterday on the administration's strikes on alleged drug boats.
There were not very good answers as to, what is the standard, what is occurring. Lawyers were supposed to be in the room. They were not. People were very frustrated in the information that was being provided.
Am I leaving satisfied? Absolutely not. They just said that they can't answer these questions because the lawyers aren't here. They canceled having the lawyers here.
Are you hearing from the right people?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Since early September, at least 61 people have been killed in 14 known strikes in the Caribbean and the Pacific. For more on this, let's bring in MSNBC senior national security reporter David Rode and retired commander of the United States Army Europe, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. So, David, starting on this new reporting from the Miami Herald, as well as the Wall Street Journal, that the administration is eyeing targets inside Venezuela to go from boats to land. How significant is this?
It's very significant. We're trying to confirm it independently. We don't have that yet. But this is a big step forward in terms of the War Powers Act. And I just looked this up. Section 3 of the War Powers Act says that the president, in every possible instance, shall consult Congress for introducing U.S. forces into imminent hostilities. And so what the Miami Herald and the Journal are reporting is that these would be strikes by U.S. forces on Venezuelan military facilities. Venezuela has anti-aircraft systems, so this is a much more serious thing than these strikes that have been happening on boats that don't really threaten U.S. forces. So we'll have to see what's happening. We'll keep pushing our sources as well. And we're reaching out to people on the Hill. And as far as I've been able to learn, members of the Hill, at least one has told me that they have not been informed of any kind of imminent strike. That doesn't mean they're not happening. They're just saying they haven't heard much information from the administration.
General, sources with knowledge of the situation are telling the Miami Herald that these strikes could come at any time. What's your reaction to this potential escalation?
Why are they doing this? Because they can. That's it. Because who's going to say no? It's one of the most insane situations, one of the most insane developments that is also the most expected. I've been warning about this for the last decade of my political commentary career, and certainly ringing the alarm bells for the last 10 months since Trump has been in office. Every single administration that came before this, whether Democrat or Republican, played a formative role in this, for the record, okay? They played a formative role in this. Now, Americans don't want this to happen. A third of Americans believe Trump's completely made-up line that each strike on a civilian vessel saves 25,000 lives. A quarter of Americans just assume that the military strikes have been approved by Congress. But overall, when you ask them, like, should we go to war in Venezuela? They're like, no. It's a deeply unpopular statement. Part of the reason why is because they haven't even done the necessary consent manufacturing that they normally would have to do. More competent administrations in the past have done so. Obviously, the most famous example of this is the George W. Bush administration with the global war on terror. But this is an expansion of executive authority and executive power, and a lack of interest from Congress, a Congress that has been nullified in general, in stopping this kind of posturing, stopping this kind of war waging. I mean, it goes even beyond. It goes even beyond the global war on terror. But the global war on terror greatly escalated the expansion of powers. Okay, the expansion of the executive authority, the expansion of the executive powers in general. It's that is a major factor here. And every single administration that we recall in our lifetimes have played a formative role in allowing someone, anyone, to basically take advantage of the situation. The U.S. Navy deployment near Venezuela has become even less popular in the past month because for a lot of people, okay, they look to the situation and they go, why the are we spending billions of dollars striking random ass towns in Venezuela potentially, or killing boaters off the shoreline of Venezuela when our roads suck, when our infrastructure is dog shit? Why are we doing any of this? You know, fix the problems here. That is a selfish American perspective, but it is the most commonly held perspective. We should use those forces to our advantage. Okay? It is utterly ridiculous. And it's very frustrating that the Democrats have not made a bigger fuss about this shit until now. Because if you don't build the underlying resentment, if you don't actually point your base of support in this direction of no war with Venezuela, no war at all, no more wars for the past couple of months, and when they do actually take advantage of the lack of pushback, they just do it. Donald Trump last week, straight up, I'm not even going to ask Congress to go to war with Venezuela, but if I do, I'm sure they would even agree with me. That's what he said. How many places warned about what was imminent? I know many of you are, I mean, you people are the worst people to ask this question because you're here every day. You're here day in, day out, even when shit's not popping. So obviously you have heard me warn about this over and over again. But where else have you seen this? Where else? Like, for how severe this is, for how severe of an escalation this is, there has been a dramatic lack of coverage. Oh.
First of all, Anna, what I'd talk about, and David's talking about the immediate strikes. What I'm more interested in as a military guy is what are the strategic objectives?
Like, people say history doesn't often repeat, but it rhymes. But in this circumstance, it's almost a repeat rather than a rhyme. Build the concentration camps on the one hand, start slamming people into those concentration camps through the exact same legal mechanisms of through the exact same propaganda vehicles of dehumanizing and constantly shifting the blame over to undocumented migrants when they are not responsible for any of the issues that you're experiencing. And then create an environment that is pliant for this kind of concentration camp initiative, which we did already. We haven't fully started denaturalizing people, but you know, that's obviously a goal of this administration. They've made that very clear. They want to shut off birthright citizenship and then move in the direction of depersonalizing and denaturalizing individuals as well, political dissidents and whatnot. This is something that they are clearly interested in doing. But then this is the Poland moment, you know what I mean? Waging war and engaging in even more expansion than prior. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison to Nazi Germany, partially because this is a post-Nazi world that we live in, and also partially because America has been the domineering force in a way that Nazi Germany never was. Okay? America has already had an unjustifiable system of a permanent underclass that never actually got their proper paperwork, despite the fact that they were living and breathing and working on U.S. soil as though they were citizens, right? And the reason for why they never got that proper paperwork is because they needed to be discardable, disposable. That was already unjustifiable to begin with. But instead of giving these people the necessary paperwork, what is this? I mean, you don't listen to the Venezuelans in your chat. Your analysis on this has genuinely been abysmal and painfully U.S.-centered. I expected the latter, but I'm still disappointed in the former. This article still feels relevant. If you want to actually learn more about the political situation in Venezuela, I recommend this news site. My people yearn for freedom, dude. My people yearn for freedom. Hasan, you don't understand the situation in Iraq, okay? Saddam is a brutal authoritarian dictator that has done ethnic cleansing campaigns, that has engaged in sectarian violence. He is a madman. He must be overthrown violently. Okay? He must be. You are not listening to the Venezuelan voices, the bodies and spaces argument. Okay? What is the argument here? What is the argument that you're presenting? I haven't even actually defended the Maduro administration at all. What I'm simply defending here is, what I'm simply advocating for here is no militarism. That's it. How many times do we have to play this song and dance? At least, please, chatter, tell me you are getting paid to do this advocacy. Because otherwise, you are literally advocating for Venezuela to turn into Iraq. Okay? I mean, it's still cruel, but at least you're getting the bag, right? Hasan, you don't understand the United States. Who says CIA in the house? Yeah. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe that people still try to pull this shit off after, like, this is not like 40 to 50 years in the past. You know what I mean? We're not like, we have immediate comparisons that we could pull from. We have contemporary examples that we can point to that American intervention of this sort is not good for the nation that we're intervening in. And it actually creates a desolate, hollowed out, bombed out, destabilized fail state in the aftermath. Look at Syria. Look at Iraq. Look at Afghanistan. And that one ended because America was like, yeah, we're holding the L on this. It is so crazy. Look at Libya. Libya is another great example. I'll give you a democratic one. You know what I mean? There has never been a moment on God's green earth where a country that America has intervened in this way and destabilized in this way has actually been left better off. Okay? This is not an advocacy for Maduro at all. Damn, you look sickening. Wait, why? Oh, that's a gay compliment? I didn't know that that was a thing. Caracas Chronicles. My name is Francisco, and I am a toxic exile. Being expelled from your own country is a caustic experience that making some of us Venezuelan exiles noxious to the cause we defend, whether we know it or not. Wait, what is this? Why are you showing me this? Like, the reason why people look for examples, especially in this moment, the reason why people look for examples, especially in this moment, for intervention is so silly to me. It's like, oh, were the past elections legit or not? Brother, does that even fucking matter? What are you talking about? We're talking about bombing this country and killing potentially millions of people and tens of millions that have already been displaced due to the fucking endless sanctions that we've applied to Venezuela. Even more will now suffer. The fuck do you mean? Oh no, their elections weren't legit. Like, what are you talking about? Saudi Arabia is one of our closest fucking allies. They are a direct monarchy, chatter. Wake the fuck up. What do you mean? This is not a consideration. This is not how things work. That's not how things work at all. You do not bomb a country into abiding by democratic values, okay? That's not how this works. If it did, it would have succeeded at least once with American military intervention. The only time it actually succeeds is after endless, unlimited amounts of war crimes. Do you actually have a successful purge of the invading forces? And then it takes like 30 to 40 years for the country to recover from that process and become like an established nation state. Look at fucking Vietnam. It's so crazy.
What's the end state? What's the administration clearly defining as mission success in this? Is it just to bomb targets, or is there something related to that? Secondly, how does this campaign, if you will, if they describe it as such, challenge broader U.S. national defense interest in the Western Hemisphere? How are they coordinating with other countries in the region? A strike against Venezuela is certainly going to affect countries like Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. And have they assessed the second and third order effects of a major naval air strike capability against...
Bombing them won't get rid of fentanyl either. Brother, there is no fentanyl coming out of Venezuela. What are we talking about? Are people even still believing that? That's bullshit. That's been bullshit. You get laughed out of every goddamn room available if you were to run with that narrative. Let me tell you something, okay? That's never been a thing. That was never a real consideration. At most, it was something to get like Trump on board potentially. I don't know. I mean, I think you probably told him that there's oil reserves and he's like, oh, I'm down. I fucking hate Maduro. Let's get those. Let's go sit on that pile, that stockpile of oil just sitting there looking pretty.
Venezuela against not only the other countries in the region, but what does that end state look like? And is there a difference between what they're claiming is counter-narcotic operations, that was the original take they mentioned, versus what appears to be either a destruction of the Venezuelan military or first strikes and an attempt to regime change? So that's just a small portion of the questions I would have as a military guy, and saying, you know, are there other people reining this in? You get into the legal ramifications like David just said and what's in the War Powers Act. You also get into operational transparency. The American public have a right to know about this, and that's why Congress is so interested, and they've been pushed aside on every request for what is happening in terms of the targeting of these boats. Anna, the questions are endless, yep. And I don't think the Trump White House has answered any of them.
I mean, there have been now at least a couple of briefings that we're aware of. But, David, we heard from those lawmakers say there is still a major lack of transparency, that they aren't getting their questions answered, in part because they aren't able to ask the right people their questions. Who should be given these briefings, and who should be part of these briefings from the administrative side? Well,
one basic thing would be, usually these are more intelligence focused, but the Gang of Eight in Congress gets to know before there's any major operation. There's maybe some gray area in terms of the military, but those would be the chairs of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, and the ranking members and the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate would be informed of this. And, you know, we'll have to see if they've heard about this. And the questions that the general's asking are the right ones, like what is the long...
What about the argument that this is to prevent China from having a foothold in South and Central America? I mean, I think it's a failure of American policy once again, because if anything, this will cause every other South American government to actively run to China. They have a lot less to lose. They are not in a permanent vassal state status in the same way that, like, in the same way that, like, the European Union is, for example. So it'll only harden their position. The thing is for the South American continent, they all have experienced, to varying degrees, American intervention, and they all fucking hate it. I gave you this example in the aftermath of the Venezuelan elections that took place. There were some inconsistencies, right? And I know everyone's going to get mad at me for saying that. You're like, oh, you're just giving in to the imperialist pigs in their argument or whatever. It doesn't fucking matter ultimately. But Latin American countries came out and they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This election looks a little sus. And then America immediately was like, this election was fake. It was illegal. And actually, we think the opposition won the election. And then do you know what happened? Every single country, including, you know, social democratic countries or leftist countries, regardless of whatever their perspective was initially about the outcome of the election, every single country came out and, oh, there it is. We did it. Crip dog. Yay, Kaya. Down. Oh, good girl. We did it. Anyway, what I was saying is every single South American country and their leadership instantly, as soon as America came out and said, oh, these elections are fake, they were like, never mind. We were wrong. We were wrong. Carry on, Venezuela. Carry on. Viva la Maduro. That's what they said. There's a reason for why they said that. There's a reason for why they immediately were like, whoa, 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 never mind. We were wrong about this. Because American intervention is something that nobody wants. How could you say Libya was a democratic overthrow? What? I never fucking said that, man. What is wrong with you guys? When have I ever said that? I literally used Libya as a great example of an undemocratic foreign intervention that destroyed the country. It collapsed the country. It literally partitioned it in two. Oh, you're dumb. I said the Democrats did it. Oh my God. No, I meant like the Democratic Party overthrew Libya. The Democrats. Please, chatter. I said like the Democrats. If you want to know like a country being overthrown and creating tremendous instability that came from the Democratic Party, Libya is the example.
Term strategy here. Again, I spoke with folks on Capitol Hill, and they did not have gotten no sense from the administration about what their long-term goal is. When the U.S. invaded Panama, that's the only comparable thing. That was to topple Manuel Noriega. There were tens of thousands of U.S. ground troops, if I remember correctly, sent into Panama. So this would be a direct strikes. I mean, you could argue it's an act of war on Venezuelan military facilities. The administration says they're used for drug trafficking. I'm not, again, sure if evidence has been presented of that. But if they strike a Venezuelan military facility, that is an act of war.
And as a layman, that's where my head went. Like, is this the U.S. declaring war? General, as we talk about the questions that need to be answered, on the House side, we heard.
Is this how people our age felt when Bush wanted to invade Iraq? I mean, there were definitely a lot of voices that were against the war, the invasion, the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq. But I would say that there was definitely more appetite to do that because Americans were even dumber back then and even angrier back then because they felt like they just wanted to kill Muslims. Okay. They were like, we got to kill Muslims. 9/11 happened. Muslims did it. We have to go and fucking show them that they can never get away with 9/11 ever again. And the administrative state at the time took advantage of that fucking anger and resentment. And that's the reason why they redirected the attention over to Saddam. They didn't even do a decent enough job of like connecting Saddam to 9/11 at all, honestly. But it didn't matter for a lot of people because they were so fucking angry. They were so excited at the prospect of this vengeance quest. Yeah. And that is what took place. Except we live in the failure. We live in the ashes that remains of the global war on terror. It was an abject failure. People understand that it was an abject failure. And it was so close. It was so close to our experience right now that it's mind-boggling to me that there's even anybody that thinks this kind of intervention is good. And I don't even think there's a lot of people that think this kind of intervention is good, if we're being real. They're just either sleepwalking into this process. And the Democrats have played a formative role in allowing that to happen by not making a much bigger fuss about this shit when the Trump administration has just been lasering fucking boats off the coastline of Venezuela over and over again, testing out how little people give a shit about it. But there's just a lot of dumb people, okay? Yeah, Maduro is asking Russia and China for help, and he should. And they should. They should help. I mean, I don't know how much they can, but it is crazy. Anyway, this is the new YouGov survey. The U.S. Navy deployment near Venezuela has become even less popular in the last month. In a new YouGov survey, we find that Americans have become less likely to approve the U.S. Navy deployment around Venezuela since September. Americans are more likely to oppose than to support military strikes on Venezuelan ships and on land targets. Most Americans would oppose a military invasion of Venezuela. More Americans would oppose than support using military force to overthrow Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro or conducting covert CIA operations in Venezuela. Another recent YouGov survey finds that Americans are divided about whether the U.S. strikes have been legal and whether the government has presented evidence. I love when Americans are asked about this because it's like, it's the same energy as like asking Americans if like Israel is doing a genocide in Gaza. It's like, yeah, that's just the truth. That is what's happening. Why are we asking Americans what the truth is? Americans just don't know what the truth is. And it's the same principle here where they're like, are the U.S. strikes on Venezuelan fishermen legal? Yeah, it doesn't matter what the Americans think. I'm glad that like the majority of Americans are questioning the legality of it. But like, regardless of what they think, it is not legal. Okay? What the fuck? What can Venezuela even do about this? Russia is cooked and China doesn't seem to want to fuck up trade. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know what kind of runway Russia has because they have their hands full to begin with. In September, YouGov surveyed Americans about U.S. military actions around Venezuela after the U.S. military amassed ships in the Caribbean Sea around Venezuela and began attacks on Venezuelan ships that the administration claimed were shipping drugs. By the way, get ready for, as a Venezuelan, this is the best thing to do because you're going to hear that a lot. You're also going to hear a lot of people go, oh, of course you would be a Maduro supporter. Of course, you're a dirty communist socialist. And you will hear greatly over-exaggerated and sometimes critique of the Maduro administration thus far in an effort to justify this kind of thing. Just get ready for that. Gear yourself up for that, okay? Marco Rubio's denying the story, but I don't trust him as far as I can fucking throw him. Your sources claiming to have knowledge of the situation tricked you into writing a fake story. U.S. poised to strike military targets in Venezuela in escalation against Maduro regime. It's crazy because it's like, why would this be fake when you're saying you're going to do this every day? Okay. What happens when it does happen? I like that the administration just goes, ha, no, that's not going to happen. And then it does happen. And they're like, how awesome was that, huh? And yes, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee absolutely played a role in this as well. They gave the Nobel Peace Prize to the woman in the opposition leadership that is begging for a military intervention. That's fucking insane. That's not only begging Trump, but like begging Israel too. Long-term strategy in Venezuela could be to get an American company leading the oil production renaissance if Maduro gets overthrown. Venezuela could become an oil supply counterbalance to Saudi Arabia in 10 years. U.S. could start seizing oil exports to China, according to Financial Times from last month. Shriner Parker, partner and head of emerging markets at Rystad Energy, said, I think the long-term strategy, again, when you see this hue, you best recognize this is an important piece of news that you're reading, okay? You see that pinkish hue, know that you're reading the Financial Times. Know that you are reading one of the only reliable news outlets out there, okay? Remember that. Socialists must always carry a copy of the Financial Times. I'm not even fucking kidding when I say this, okay? They are far better than every other outlet, pinkish, beige, whatever the fuck you want to call it. This is this hue, the Financial Times hue. That's light tan, the tone of honest reporting. Exactly. I think the long-term strategy the Trump administration is employing here is to say we need to have some American company with its foot in the door so that if and when this changes, we can be in a position to lead or at least be a part of the renaissance of production. If you can get Maduro out and you can get the Western oil companies back into Venezuela, then Venezuela could become a supply to counterbalance to Saudi Arabia in the mid to late 2030s. The U.S. naval buildup has not moved the needle to exports to China, which are flowing normally, according to Francisco Minaldi, a Latin American energy expert at Rice University. Minaldi added things could change if the U.S. seized an oil tanker with some excuse like sanctions evasion, drug smuggling, or money laundering by the Cartel de los Soles. Okay, which is the fake reason that they're giving to say that Venezuela is a narco-terrorist state. Okay, they dug deep for that one. And is barely trying to manufacture consent at all here. This is the reason. Financial Times, I thought the Financial Times was centrist, right-leaning. It doesn't matter because it is the paper for capitalists. They need to know exactly how to make market decisions, and therefore their reporting is much more reliable. It's finance. It's the Financial Times, okay? We're not talking about the opinion editorials. We're talking, or even when we talk about the opinion editorials, like they're going to be more honest about how things are going. They will do fact-based reporting because those who want to make decisions about where the markets are going to go need to make those decisions after being informed on the facts. And if they want to be informed on the facts, they have to go and read one newspaper that actually does that kind of honest, fact-based reporting. You cannot make solid investment decisions if you have no grasp over the truth. Yeah, it's the same reason exactly as the shadow says. Is why insurance companies don't play when it comes to Florida property rates. Yeah, that's like those. There are resources that you can rely on. Everybody can say climate change is fake. Okay, climate change is fake. It's made up. But ultimately, the insurance providers don't work in that fake universe. They work in the universe of truth. They have to make those decisions, otherwise they will go insolvent. They will go bankrupt. So obviously, if you want to know whether climate change is a genuine catastrophic thing for a state like Florida, for example, or even California for wildfires, look no further than analyzing how the insurance providers are operating. Anyway, getting back to YouGov poll, approval of the U.S. Navy's presence around Venezuela has fallen since September. Since September, when YouGov last polled Americans about military actions around Venezuela, support for the Navy's presence has declined. In September, Americans' views were about evenly divided. 36% strongly or somewhat approved of the naval development and 38% disapproved. Today, the share of who approve has fallen to 30%, while the share of who disapprove has little changed at 37%. The greatest change in opinion has occurred among Republicans. While the majority of Republicans approve the military presence around Venezuela, the share who say they approve has fallen to 58% from 68% in September. The share who disapprove has grown to 17% from 13%. More Americans oppose than support military and CIA actions in and around Venezuela. I cannot believe how many fucking Americans still want it, though. It's crazy. Like, I can't believe how many Republicans, like 58% of Republicans are still like, hell yeah, baby, I love the Navy around Venezuelan coastlines. God damn it, dude. constantly have to be at the mercy of barbaric morons. And I fucking hate that. I can't begin to explain to you how much I hate the mass approval for unlimited murder and bloodshed coming from some of the dumbest people on the planet. Most Democrats disapprove of the strike, 67% disapprove, while only 8% approve, and more independents disapprove than approve, 42% to 21%. On the other hand, a majority of Republicans approve of the strikes, while 16% disapprove. More Americans disapprove than approve of U.S. military attacks on ships around Venezuela. Out of U.S. adult citizens, strongly or somewhat approve is at 27%, not sure is at 31%, and 42% say strongly or somewhat disapprove. This means that if there was at least like a little bit of fucking manufactured consent around these attacks, there would be a lot of Americans that have appetite for this death and destruction, by the way. So even with this like demonstrably incompetent administration that hasn't even tried to really flood the media markets with like justifications for why we have to kill these fishermen, there's still clearly plenty of appetite for death and destruction. Striking land targets in Venezuela, which Trump says he is considering, is less popular than attacks on ship. Nearly half of Americans say they would strongly or somewhat oppose the U.S. military attacking and destroying targets on land in Venezuela. Only 19% say they would support such strikes. Democrats would overwhelmingly oppose such attacks, 68% versus 9% who would support them. Independents are also more likely to oppose than to support strikes on land, 46 to 13. Republicans are closely divided. More say they would support such strikes at 38. For the rest of the world, for those in the global south that were laughing at the United States of America, this is part of the reason why I said it's not a laughing matter. The unfortunate reality is that when the American government is led by an authoritarian fascist madman, you are still going to suffer, because the decisions that we make over here that you have no control over will end up hurting you in the long run, or even in the short run. Oh, how long until AI-powered videos justifying the strikes, like showing fake drugs? I don't even know. As was the case in September, most Americans now would not like to see the U.S. engage in a more significant military conflict with Venezuela. A majority of Americans would oppose the U.S. invading Venezuela, while only 15% would support an invasion. Jesus Christ. 30% are still unsure. More Americans would oppose than support the U.S. using military force to overthrow Nicolas Maduro. 46% strongly or somewhat oppose it. 18% strongly or somewhat support it. Support for covert CIA operations in Venezuela, which Trump authorized in October, is also far from widespread. More Americans oppose the CIA engaging in covert operations at 37%, as opposed to those supporting it at 28%. We will never... There's still motherfuckers in the chat going like, how's your dog doing, Hasan? Shock your dog yet? It's like, dude, we don't deserve anything good. We only deserve the bad. We only deserve the bad things. This is what we are demanding, okay? Like, sometimes I think to myself, how do we get here, right? But I think it's pretty obvious how we got here. There's just a lot of fucking stupid people out there. There's a lot of angry people out there. There's a lot of people who are weak and insecure and want to feel strong. And how can you feel strong? By showing America's military might, by fucking over people that we've already fucked over in perpetuity, by killing them, by directly killing them with our military, killing them dead. And we saw a fraction of this animosity and anger and lack of restraint and insecurity with the whole like Yemeni population is going to learn today why we don't have health care. You remember that multiple billion-dollar bombing campaign that the United States of America engaged in against the poorest country on the fucking planet, Yemen? That was awesome. Dropping fucking planes out of aircraft carriers in the process. Yeah, we really learned that lesson, didn't we? We are the ones who should be learning that lesson. Biden did it. Trump did it. Everybody did it. More Americans oppose than support covert CIA operations in Venezuela. What Americans believe about recent boat strikes. Americans are divided on recent U.S. military strikes on boats in international waters. In a series of strikes in international waters, the U.S. military has destroyed boats and killed several dozen people that the government claims were involved in drug smuggling. Do you approve or disapprove of the strikes? This is perhaps the most important piece, because this is what they have actually at least defended, right? What they have actually celebrated, right? This administration has come out and said, this is what we're doing, and it's fucking awesome, right? That means that there was at least some kind of propagandizing to the American population about whether or not this was a justifiable act. So the reason why this is the most important information is because all of these numbers are slated to change. Okay? With a little bit of push, you see how Americans actually do think this is cool. Americans are divided, and yet 42% strongly or somewhat approve of the military strikes on random fucking boaters. 43% disapprove of it. Okay? That is far too close. And if you notice, only 15% are unsure. Republicans, of course, once again, at 76% approval for the boat strikes. Remember, totally unjustifiable, transparently illegal, cruel, unusual, ridiculous empire shit, Nazi shit, if you will. The idea that we just get to fucking laser boats off of the Venezuelan coastline is ridiculous, okay? With no evidence whatsoever of whether or not they're actually trafficking drugs, and with more evidence coming out that they certainly are not, as a matter of fact. But even if they were literally shipping drugs, which they are not, okay? But even if they were, this is not what you do. This is not how this is handled, okay? It's ridiculous that Americans think, no, that's the only way to do it. That's the only thing that we can do. That there are 42% of Americans, 76% of Republicans that say, no, that is how you're supposed to do it. You don't know if they're shipping drugs? I know. There is at least evidence to suggest that they weren't, however. Okay? But it doesn't even matter if they were, because that is not how you're supposed to deal with drug shipments. We can overtake these boats. Okay? You can create an investigation. That's what you're supposed to do. What do you mean? Like, think about it. Think about it at the domestic level. Okay? Think about it at the domestic level. Do you think there is no reason for due process? Do you think there is no reason for investigations to take place? I know that for many Americans, I had to explain the importance of due process over and over again when the Trump administration talked about potentially destroying it. But when you don't have due process, everybody's a target, okay? Your words, they aren't shipping drugs. Oh my God. I said there is more evidence to suggest that they are not shipping drugs than there is evidence to suggest that they are. Okay. And by the way, this is not my assessment. This is the assessment of the Department of Homeland Security. This is the assessment of the DEA. If you look at any of the readily available data from the government, okay, they are not shipping drugs. They are not shipping drugs. It is unimaginably unlikely that they are shipping drugs, especially drugs to the United States of America. That is not how drugs are shipped. Anything about how drug trafficking works, you would know that they are not coming from, fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela by way of fast boats. It's confusing to you because you're fucking stupid, okay? Drugs come in through regular ports, regular points of entry. The chemical compounds necessary to make fentanyl come in through actual carriers, like actual big ships, okay? Or packaged inside of fucking cars that are driven by American citizens. They're not trafficked over the border in the pockets of otherwise law-abiding abuelas and random people, and they're not being shipped into the country by Venezuelan fast boats. There is no reason to entertain this ridiculous fucking narrative. Oh. There is no significant amount of narco trafficking coming out of Venezuela to begin with. And there is no evidence whatsoever that this is the case. Once again, DropSite actually reported on this. DropSite actually reported on this. You know who reported on it? Sagar, as a matter of fact. The dude that I was doing a piece with, or doing a talk with at the New Yorker Festival, the morning of our talk, Sagar actually reported on it. Inside Marco Rubio's push for regime change in Venezuela. Little to no fentanyl is coming from Venezuela, according to U.S. intelligence. U.S. intelligence has assessed that little to none of the fentanyl trafficked to the United States is being produced in Venezuela, despite recent claims from the Trump administration. A senior U.S. official directly familiar with the matter tells DropSite. The official noted that many of the boats targeted for strikes by the Trump administration do not even have the requisite gasoline or motor capacity to reach the U.S. waters, dramatically undercutting claims by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Brother, please stop. Stop. I don't care about the fucking California governor's race right now, man. Oh my God. You're just spamming it in the chat so you can fucking say, oh, Hasan doesn't fuck with the Green Party. Shut up. Jesus Christ. The claim is backed by recent comments made by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who similarly noted that zero fentanyl is produced in Venezuela. Despite the lack of intelligence linking Venezuela with fentanyl production, the Trump administration has made alleged Venezuelan drug trafficking the cost belly in its drive to overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro. On Thursday, President Donald Trump referred to possible ground action, claiming at a press conference that the sea drugs coming in are 5% of what they were a year ago. So now they're coming in by land. The land is going to be next, he said, indicating he was willing to bypass congressional approval. On Friday, the U.S. announced it is sending an aircraft carrier to Latin America in a further escalation. You don't do this kind of stuff just for strategic posturing. You do this because you want to fucking go to war with Venezuela. Okay? So no matter what people say, no matter what people say in the admin, like, oh, we're not going to war with Venezuela. That's crazy. They are saying that they want to go to war with Venezuela. On your knees for the Dems? What are you saying? Fuck the Dems. What the fuck is this has to do with anything right now, man? This is what I mean. Some of you guys are so one note. You're so hyper focused on like one singular thing and you want to just like constantly fucking eat away at it. Like, I'm trying to do news coverage, man. Please. If you want to say fuck the Dems on this issue, then the way you should say fuck the Dems on this issue is that they haven't actually brought any of this stuff up to the forefront of public consciousness. Okay? Because it is true. That would be a valid concern for this story. Okay? They're not in power, but it doesn't matter, chatters. They have legitimacy. They are the opposition party, okay? They should let their voices be heard. They should encourage people to do the same. It's not like their voices are silenced, you know? They can still talk. Yeah. From Trump's own 2025 DEA National Drug Threat Assessment, Venezuela does not appear once in the report in the fentanyl section, and briefly appears only to highlight Trinidad as a low-level street traffickers who specialize in human trafficking. The administration itself admits that it has no idea whose drug boats are being bombed. There is no evidence overall that Venezuela is a major narco-trafficking hub. As a matter of fact, there's only evidence to suggest the exact opposite. But it doesn't fucking matter. That's my point. It's crazy that none of this shit matters anymore. You could just be like, nope, we're doing it. And no one seems to get mad over it. Two sources familiar with the discussions of the White House note that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a longtime proponent of regime change in Venezuela, has been the driving force behind the aggressive military and rhetorical posture towards the Maduro regime. Toward that end, Secretary Rubio, also in charge of the remnants of the U.S. Agency for International Development, has redirected millions of dollars in money previously allocated for pro-democracy measures in Venezuela and the surrounding countries, a thinly veiled effort to prep the region for war. Maybe that's why we're not seeing so many people in the chat being like, as a Venezuelan, please bomb DC, Caracas, reduce the rubble with nukes. Rubio cycled through multiple arguments for regime change in Venezuela during the early months of the administration, largely based around human rights and election concerns, which were unconvincing to Trump. After assuming a position on the National Security Council in the spring, Rubio then presented a new argument to Trump, that Maduro was a narco-terrorist drug trafficker based on a 2020 indictment by the Department of Justice under the first Trump administration over alleged cocaine trafficking. The official noted Trump's personal distaste for drugs and a campaign pledge to use the U.S. military against Mexican drug cartels as an important impetus for Trump greenlighting recent strikes. Half the time, the lie that they're telling the public is actually just to manipulate Trump, by the way. That's the other side of this fucking story. Like, because Trump is somewhat malleable. He's somewhat persuadable. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, the lie is usually not for you because these guys kind of understand that it doesn't really matter what the voices of the public say. They can always pick the slack up and pump a little bit of propaganda, and Americans are so fucking stupid broadly that they'll be like, yeah, we should do it actually. I mean, what? What are you, defending Maduro? What are you, defending Maduro? It's so fucking stupid. It's like, whoa, you're defending Maduro's regime? Think for a moment. What will happen? Think for a moment what will happen. What will happen to Venezuela? What will happen to the Venezuelans? You do not bomb a country and then install democracy. That doesn't happen. It's just a lie that Americans tell themselves to sleep soundly and comfortably at night. to believe that they're still somehow the world police, that they're still doing it for the greater good. It's just bullshit.
The briefing wasn't good enough, but at least it was a bipartisan briefing. On the Senate side, some Democrats say they were cut out of the briefing entirely. Take a listen.
If you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of 8 level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats? Who was willing to say, isn't there a constitutional obligation here? It is about separation of powers. For the folks who wave their Constitution around, read the damn thing. And then explain why you would sit through that briefing and not call foul.
General, what red flags does it raise to just brief one party?
Oh, it's off the chart, Anna. And here's what I think the senator is getting at is not only are they not getting the intelligence they need to commit to potentially an authorization for use of military force, but I'm going to take it down to my level. You're putting American men and women, their soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, in harm's way. And the nation needs to understand why that's happening. And the question you asked earlier is who should be giving these briefings? Well, I don't know who was in the room providing them. The lawyers are certainly a part of it, but I think it should be not only the president or the vice president, the Secretary of State, the intelligence community, as David said, the Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Staff, and the person who has to execute the briefing is the Southcom commander, which we know right now that's an interim commander because Admiral Halsey retired just a few days ago or offered his retirement because he had contention with some of the things that were going on down there. So you're seeing probably a couple of people push these strikes at the behest of the president when you're putting men and women in harm's way, and that's just not the right way to go to war. David mentioned Operation Just Cause in 1989 when we went in and took out a leader of a drug cartel who was also the head of government, Manuel Noriega. That took literally weeks to determine. There was great planning. There was intelligence sharing between the Pentagon, the State Department, and the Congress. And this seems to be rather haphazard and almost covert on the part of the government in terms of what they're about to do.
And I know you have so much experience from those days. Lieutenant General, you have a book coming out too, right? Remind us what that's called.
I do. It's a book called If I Don't Return. It was based on some journal entries I made during Operation Desert Storm, and then our oldest son asked us to expand it to cover the last 30 years of my career. So it's a reflection and some entries on the military, the changes in our military life, love, and military families. So I think it's more of a reflection of what's been happening since 1990 in Desert Storm.
Well, we look forward to that. I know it is going to be out in the new year. Mark Hertling, David Rode, thank you both.
Hold on.
In the last few weeks, there's been a big buildup of United States forces.
I'm trying to put the fucking cape back on, dude. I had to take it off I had to take everything off to pee. It's crazy. The things I do for just a second, a fraction of a second of a goddamn meme. Literal women in bodysuits? Yeah, exactly. To get all naked and shit. Cut a pea slit. It's not like if I cut a pea slit, my dick is going to flop out while I'm in the process of doing news coverage when I get up. There's going to be far bigger problems. Now you know how us gays feel when we wear overalls? Yeah. I feel like an overall is still easier to take off. Performance issues, boss. Yeah. Oh, there's the other problem here too, is a Florida occupied government. And this is one of the problems that comes along with that. An important note we found in our reporting, Trump is surrounded by Floridians in the White House who are hardcore on Venezuela. His Secretary of State, his Attorney General, his Chief of Staff, much of his comm staff, and he himself are Florida residents. This cannot be understated as regime change ramps up. This idea that destabilizing Venezuela won't also cause regional destabilization as a result of a likely refugee crisis is naive and blind refusal to use history as evidence for what happens after these interventions. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. Easy fix, just put on some undies over the costume that now has a crotch hole. Classic 50s Superman look, by the way. Yeah, where is Donald Trump trying to topple Venezuela's president?
In the Caribbean, apparently directed towards Venezuela. Ships, aircraft, quite a lot of troops. Something looks as if it's about to happen. What might that be?
Se están inventando una nueva guerra eterna.
This is one of the biggest buildups of American forces in some years. It involves an assault ship, a cruiser.
Funnily enough, the hogs here in Trinidad constantly call to deport Venezuelan migrants, but are also cheering on the U.S. I know. It's very, very dumb. It's very, very stupid. They don't realize that this is like going to make things worse. Also, it's additionally stupid because like Trini people have been killed so far for even boating between Venezuela and Trinidad. So what the fuck? Oh, God, these people don't care. They don't care about you. I don't know how to describe it. They don't even care about American citizens. Why would they give a shit about the brown people in general?
3 destroyers, troop carriers, a submarine, quite a lot of Marines, and now the biggest warship in the world, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, is in Split, on its way apparently now across the Atlantic to join this.
I bet you a bunch of those boys got some tattoos, okay, when they were on shore leave. You know what I mean? Famous place to get tattoos, Split. Croatia.
Task group. So this clearly is a very impressive military display of power. It looks as if all this is directed at some sort of intervention in Venezuela. But an invasion itself is not very likely, and Venezuela is a pretty big country. But ground operations of some sort, hitting targets on the ground, does look as if it's in the American playbook, and certainly President Trump has indicated that that may follow next.
But we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control.
Why then might he want to do this, particularly against Venezuela, but also in a way threatening other governments in the region who he also thinks are in the...
Want to nibble Hasan's
runners. But if this is about counter-narcotics, these are the wrong targets, because over 80% of all of the drugs that come from Central and South America into the United States come through the land borders in Mexico. They come across the customs posts because they're smuggled through. And those that do come by boat mainly come through the Pacific, not through the Atlantic. Now, there have been a couple of strikes on boats in the Pacific, directed not at Venezuela, but at other governments in the region.
This is a national security problem. They killed 300,000 people last year, these drugs coming in. You know, it's pretty unusual when you see somebody with a fishing rod and 5 engines on the back of the boat. You know, you don't need that to go fishing. Wait. And we will hit them very hard when they come in by land.
So the Americans have already started to strike what they say are the narcotics routes, even though the rest of us know these are not the narcotics routes. So something else is clearly going on. There seem to be 2 objectives here. One, fairly obviously, is to try to remove President Maduro of Venezuela. So who is Nicolas Maduro? This man who is at odds with President Trump. He began as an ultra-leftist president. He's now just a straightforward dictator, ruling by brutal repression. He's long been a thorn in America's side, and America have tried to get rid of him in the past and failed. This may be an opportunity to bounce him out of power, to bring the opposition out onto the streets and simply frighten.
They hate him because of his swag, bro. Look at this fit. That's crazy. That's a crazy hoodie.
The Venezuelans into getting rid of Maduro. That may be easier said than done because he's surrounded by a kind of ring of steel and quite a lot of supporters who depend on him for their livelihood.
Hoy estamos viendo la confrontación entre 2 mundos. Ellos allá con su supremacismo fracasado, decadente, derrotado, y nosotros acá con nuestra resistencia milenaria victoriosa, avanzando.
The other objective, almost certainly, is acting as a visible deterrent to all of the drug bans in Central and South America. And the message to them is that we're going to attack you wherever we see you. Wherever you're sending your drugs, we're going to attack you. So stop sending them to the United States. And in a sense, this is like deterrence by denial. If you're going to have drugs, send them to Europe, send them elsewhere in South America, but don't send them to the north towards the United States, whether through Mexico or anywhere else.
If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
One of the reasons that we can be fairly certain that this is an anti-Maduro operation is because Donald Trump astonishingly announced that he was authorizing the CIA to undertake covert operations in Venezuela.
Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged
Well, I can't
drug
do
boats in
that,
the
but
Caribbean?
I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America.
I mean, they can't be that covert if the president has just announced them, but nevertheless, that's what he's done. And there's a long history of this in American relations with Central and South America. In 1961, famously, the CIA tried to displace Castro in Cuba. In 1973, they successfully displaced Allende, left-wing government in Chile.
This is a laundry list of why nobody in South America fucks with this kind of behavior. Okay? Just so you understand.
Installed Pinochet, who was very right-wing. And then in the 1980s, they ran what became the Iran-Contra affair in Nicaragua, trying to undermine the government of Nicaragua by backing their own opposition groups. Of those three cases, one of them was successful, though did the US no favors in the long run. Two of them were unsuccessful. This looks as if it might be a fourth big attempt to displace a government in a big country in Latin America.
But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, but I think a lot of other countries are feeling heat too.
And interestingly, in this task force of ships that are assembling around Venezuela is the MV Ocean Trader. And the MV Ocean Trader is a special forces ship. It engages in all sorts of special operations, and it launches other ships and boats and individuals from the special forces.
Yeah, Maduro, brutal authoritarian dictator, Pinochet was just very right-wing, is a crazy assessment to make. Okay? Like, criticisms of Maduro aside, there is no comparison. Like, Pinochet was devastating. Far, far more brutal. But of course, he was an American puppet, and therefore you're just like, he's just kind of like a right-wing guy, you know? He's just a goofy guy. Straight up fascist war criminal, by the way. When you see people on the timeline post like, we're going to give these socialist helicopter rides, they're talking about Pinochet. Famously had the practice of disappearing people by rounding them up and then throwing them into the ocean through from the helicopter, throwing them into bodies of land through the helicopter rides. Yeah, Pinochet, like Adam shit. Yeah, Pinochet.
Go and do whatever it is they've been ordered to go and do. What might this indicate in the grand scheme of things? Well, the United States is rethinking its whole security policy. It certainly wants to get out of Europe. It wants to get out of the Middle East. It wants a deal with China so as not to have to bother too much with Asia. And a lot of thinking at the moment in the United States is that the US will be isolationist for the next era, which means the next 30 or 40 years. And that isolationism will also take the form of regarding Central and South America as America's zone of interest, its zone of influence. And in a sense, I think what the Trump administration wants to do is to show governments in Central and South America and drug cartels in Central and South America that there is a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
And that sheriff...
They want to show the other drug cartels that there's a new sheriff in town by striking a totally random country that is not significant at all in narco trafficking. Yeah, we really showed them. We really showed this random thing. Okay, cool. God damn, dude. Oh, peace president, by the way. Peace president, peace president, peace president, peace president. Meanwhile, as we are moving in this direction, and I gave you, I think, plenty of evidence at this point that it's fucking utterly bullshit. The other side of the story is, of course, exclusive. Documents show that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has drafted a letter asking for Russia for missiles, radars, and upgraded aircrafts in U.S. forces as U.S. forces amass in the Caribbean. Okay? But obviously, there is still fresh hell to unlock. Obviously, there's still fresh hells to unlock. Because while that's happening, Donald Trump and the Republican Party under